like me, you look at some of the vintage pieces that have been quilted by others and you just drool over them. Somehow you just can't manage to find those kind of pieces to quilt. Or you're kind of picky what you want to do your quilting on. Not all things appeal to you. The thing that really turned me on to vintage quilting was when a client sent me a tablecloth and asked me to quilt it into a quilt. I enjoyed the process immensely, and I didn't want to give it up when I was done. I've always enjoyed doing whole cloth quilts, and this was the next best thing to it. So I thought maybe I was on to something. This was a post on our Facebook group. It was an antique piece, but it gave me inspiration as far as making something vintage. They say necessity is the mother of invention. I want to do a vintage quilt, but I want to do it my way. So hence, here is my take on the hexagons. A materials list will be made available at the Sit Down Free Motion Quilters Facebook group and the accompanying workbook. To start the process, after selecting my embroidery designs, I stitched them out on pieces of linen backed with lightweight tearaway stabilizer. The linen was cut approximately 15 inches square, and the design was centered in the middle of that square. The first thing you need to do is to embroider out your design. And then we're going to take the open hexagon template that I've cut out of cardstock, and we're going to use that to center the embroidery with, like so. Then we're going to take a ruler and we're going to put the edge of the template and we're going to mark out 1 inch from there, and we're going to trim. After trimming around the hexagon, this is what you'll end up with. And then we go on to our next step. You're going to take your embroidered piece and we're going to place it face down on your earning surface. And then you're going to take your solid template and center it. And again, this does not have to be exact, but you want to get it close. And we're going to fold up a hem against that template. And again, this is why you need to have a dry iron, because if you used steam, you'll curl your template, and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to turn that around, and we're going to go to the next side. Press it up flat against your template and press. Turn it. Press it flat against your template and press. We're going to turn it and press. And make sure when you're pressing that the edge of your template is tight into the hem that you're pressing up. If you don't, then you're going to have trouble when it comes time to putting the hexagons together, because they're not going to measure correctly. And now we're down to our last piece. Push that up and press.
After you have all 6 sides pressed against the template, we're going to carefully remove the template. We're going to flip it right sides up, wrong side down. We're going to adjust to make sure that we are folding under the hem and that we're folding it with the crease nice and smooth around the edges. This is when I use my steam to get a nice sharp crease on those hems. And you're going to do that for all 7 embroidered pieces. In order to get really nice sharp creases in your piece, what I like to do is give it one final press. And I'm going to do that using spray starch. I also want to talk about the pressing surface that I'm using. If you can hear that, it's basically a hardcore wood that I'm pressing on, so that really helps to also get the creases in there. Now when I'm starching it heavy. I'm basically soaking that creased edge. And I'm going to rub that starch into the crease. And after I'm done doing that, now I'm going to really give it a good steam. Now you can see this edge over here was steamed before, but it's still standing up. After the starch has been put on it, that really makes it behave, and it sits down nice and flat like we want it to. And now it's time to join your pieces together after you've stitched, pressed, starched. Your pieces should all match up like so. Now, we can't pin them because there's no overlapping here, so trying to use a pin to join these together is not going to work really well. What will work really well is something a little unusual, and that's tape. We're just going to take pieces of tape and we're going to temporarily tape these pieces together like so. Now we're ready to stitch. So using our bridging stitch.
For those of you who are pure quilters and have never experienced a lot of the other stitches on your machines, this is what's called a bridging stitch, and it's the one in the center marked 209. Now the bridging stitch is designed to bridge between 2 pieces of fabric without any overlap whatsoever. That's why we're taping these pieces together versus trying to pin them together. The stitch is pretty basic. It takes 1 stitch forward, does a little zig and a zag on the one side, takes another stitch forward, does another zig and a zag on the other side, and it continues on in this manner. Now the stitch that it's taking forward is actually going to sink right in between those two pieces. What's strengthening this bond between these two pieces is the zigzag pulling it together. So it's meshing those two pieces of fabric. Now, we could use a zigzag like this, but because it doesn't have that straight stitch in between, it may bunch that seam together versus letting it lay completely flat.
You can use a couple different feet to accomplish this. You can use your regular foot on your machine, or you can use a foot that's called an edge joining foot, and it looks like this. Not a whole lot different than the foot that's on there, with the exception that it has this rudder coming right down through the middle. Can you see that? And that's going to run between the two pieces and keep everything straight for you. So we're going to change out the regular foot, put on the joining foot, and I have a fairly fine thread that I'm using here, because we really don't want this thread to show. We're going to overstitch this again with the wing needle. But right now, what we want to do is to stitch these two pieces together. So, we're going to put that rudder right down between the two pieces, like so. And we're going to start stitching. Now I'm going to stop the camera here and get a closer view for you so you can see how this stitch actually works. Now you can see a little bit closer how this is going to work. And we don't want to stitch over our tape, so when we get to it, we're going to lift the piece of tape up and out of the way. And we'll continue on with our stitching. And we do want to help hold them together as it's stitching, but I'm going to see if I can just zoom in a little bit here without getting it too far out of focus. Bear with me. As this stitch is being formed, you can see how it takes a stitch on each side of this center seam. And the nice thing about this foot is that it's actually guiding my stitches down between the two pieces. Again, I'm going to remove this piece of tape. Again, this is just regular Scotch tape, nothing special. And we'll continue stitching this. This foot is really wonderful because right now I'm really not looking at these pieces of fabric like I normally would. I'm looking through the viewfinder on my camera because it's right in front of me. But because of that rudder, I can see that it is going right down between the two pieces, so the stitches are falling right where I need them to. Now when I'm done, I'm just going to stitch off and cut my thread. And now, just like that, I have these two pieces stitched together. Now after you have all the pieces assembled and stitched together, that's when we'll do the wing needle work. So I'll switch over to the wing needle so you can see how that's going to work.
Please join us in our next segment where we learn how to piece together our hexagons with no Y seams, but giving it a much more of a vintage look.